CH1, the 1st of October 2020. That's 35-minute lesson.
Did you make it?
Okay.
You could have just taken credit back there.
Okay. Know the definitions really well. Read the questions extremely carefully. And make sure that when you read the sources, you read them with care.
Sources?
Okay, so just read it with care. Think carefully before you answer. Okay.
Or we use the credibility and reliability and whatnot.
Maybe, maybe not.
Is that a maybe yes or maybe no?
I think that's what maybe means. Means maybe yes or maybe no. It means, guys, you can do this. Okay. Right. So, going, human population. So we finished and everybody's put away their phones and we're now starting on the human population thing, which is the last part of population studies. And so on Monday, we will start with the next section of your matric syllabus. Okay. All right. We're happy. We stopped moving, we stopped fiddling, we're listening, we're focused. Liver, you're going to wait till I start talking before you open that and start fiddling with it. Okay, right, going. Okay, human population. Once upon a time there were 2 humans, now they're over 7.5 billion, and in fact they're more than 7.5 billion now. Okay, in my lifetime this has gone like this. Okay, now I know that you know that I'm old, but I mean that's pretty hectic. Considering how long the earth has been around and considering how long humans have been around. The fact that it has gone from that to that within 60 years is very scary. Okay, so the world population, quite obviously if I talk about the world population, I'm talking about the number of humans on planet Earth. If you go to this particular site, there's some good questions to think about and answer. Okay. If you want, there's a very nice video on this site that you can go to and have a look at if you want. Okay. If you go to this particular site, you'll see that there's something that updates the world population as you watch it. So I'll have a look at that now. But it's an automatically updated daily calculation by the United States Census Bureau, and it estimates the current world population. When I did this for the current grade 12s on the 30th of March, that was the world population. But when I revised it for your group on the 11th of August, that was the world population. Okay, so that's how much it had gone up in that period of time, which I think is less than 6 months. Okay. I've discussed with you that I don't say figures because ex-President Jacob Zuma and Nelly on the radio and I cannot say figures. So I can't say this. Well, I can say it just doesn't sound like anything intelligent. So Nelly was trying to say on the radio, you know who I mean, hey, Nelly? She was trying to say, oh, now I'm going to get myself into trouble. 799,900 rand. And she could not say it. Now, I can't say that either. Okay, so, good. It's quite scary to look at this site and watch the numbers increasing. If I click that, is it going to go to that site? Yay. Okay, so we've got two things here. We've got United States on this side and world population on this side.
Is that like actually happening right now? No, no.
Ma'am, how does that happen?
I think it's just by, I don't think it's like, you know, somebody pops out a booby and this thing goes up. I think it's on average. That's how many are going.
I was going to say, should it's inaccurate because you also have people dying at the same time.
Yeah, but yeah. So there would be that they would have to take into account.
Yeah. So surely it won't just keep going up and kind of go up, down, down.
No, because you very seldom get more people dying than a born. So it would be going up, but it would just be. I would be quite interested to know whether COVID has actually made any significant change to this. Okay, so look at this interesting one on the US population. So it goes up much slower. One birth every 8 seconds, one death every 12 seconds. One international migrant net every 47 seconds. Do you get what net means? So if I get an income of 1,000 rand, but I spend 800 rand, the net is 2. Is it 200? I don't do figures. Okay, it's the difference between the minus and the plus. Okay, so there might be people emigrating, but net one person immigrates every 47 seconds. So net gain of one person every 18 seconds. Anyway.
Like the totals, like when you account for the goods.
Oh, are you doing this total for me here? Okay, maybe.
Yeah.
Seems feasible. Okay. Right, so there we've got, this is what we're going to work on just now, is population pyramids. So what this shows is currently, and you can go back and make a change, currently this is the population age pyramid of the United States. So this shows the percentage of the population on this axis, and this is age groups. And always on the right side is females, and always on the left side is males.
Is it because females always right?
That was good. That was quick. Okay. Interesting here is the top 10 most populous countries on July the 1st, 2020. And I'll go through some of those with you now. Okay. All right. So the world population has experienced continuous growth. In other words, it's increased continuously since the end of the era of the Black Death. And remember that the Black Death was the bubonic plague, okay, caused by a bacterium, Yersinia pestis, around about 1400. Okay, highest rates of growth. Now this looks very low, but it's actually high. Highest rates of growth above 1.8% per year were seen briefly during the 1950s and up until the 1970s. So 1950, 1960, 1970, the growth rate in 1970 peaked at 2.2%, in 63. And then it went down by the year 2009 to 1.1, which is actually much, much lower than that. It seems like it's not a big figure, not a big difference, but in terms of adding to the population of the world, it's a huge difference. So annual births have reduced to 140 million since they peaked at 173 million in the late 1990s. They're expected to remain constant, deaths number 57 million, and the issue is the difference between those. But it is thought that deaths will increase to 90 million by the year 2050. Okay. Current projections show a continued increase of population but a steady decline in population growth rate. Does this make sense to you? Do you understand that you can have an increase in population but a decline in growth rate and it still makes sense? Joshua!
Yes, ma'am.
Give me the iPad.
One slide, maybe one slide, because
Way too busy going on there. Yes, I'm listening.
So would it be like, in the rate of increase decreases, so that kind of...
Yes, absolutely. So, yes, you're making that very good link going there. So, when that line starts to go there, so the decelerating phase, okay, and the population is expected to reach between 8 and 10.5 billion by the year 2050. Now, when I was at varsity, the doubling was expected to happen initially in 30 years, and then in 15 years, and then in 7.5 years. So the rate of increase was increasing. When I was at varsity, we were in this phase. But in fact, what has happened is it slowed down and we're starting to go into that phase. Okay, so that's that thing. Remember, anything that is in blue you don't have to learn. At the dawn of agriculture, in other words, when people actually started to grow crops and things like that, as opposed to just going out and collecting stuff from the veldt, population of the world was approximately 5 million. In the next 8,000 year period, up to 1 AD, it grew to 200 million, although some people estimate 300 million or even 600 million, which tells you how imprecise population estimates are. And quite obviously, there's no way of telling what the population was at that stage of the game. There's nothing, there's no evidence. A tremendous change occurred with the Industrial Revolution. Whereas it had taken all of human history until the year 1800 for the world population to reach 1 billion, the second billion was achieved in only 130 years. So by 1930, it changed from 1 billion to 2 billion, and within the next 30 years, by 1960, it had gone up to 3 billion. The fourth billion, 15 years, fifth billion, only 13 years. So it's already starting to slow down. Okay. All right. During the 20th century alone, the population of the world has grown from 1.65 billion to 6 billion. 1970, there were roughly half as many people in the world as there are now. But because of declining growth rates, it will now take over, they think, over 200 years to double again. Okay, all right. I'm just a bit worried about Kim, because she did accept an invite. Sorry, I just want to email her quickly.
Should I message her on that?
Oh, yeah, if you don't mind. Just say Mrs. Page is worried that you're not on And is everything okay? Is there anything I can do to make it happen? Thank you. Okay, so this was the latest data for which I could get a graph, which estimated that it would be 9 billion by the year 2042, more or less. Okay. But this does show a steady growth rate, and perhaps it's actually started to decrease a little bit. Okay. So just for interest, this should be in blue. Global population has risen so fast over the past century that roughly 14% of all human beings that have ever existed are still alive today, which is quite a sobering statistic. It's unsustainable for a variety of reasons, not least being able to feed everyone, as well as the impact on the climate and the environment. Okay. Credible, not credible? Why?
And it's a
Professor, okay, and academic institution, and remember the reputation of an academic institution depends on the credibility of the information put out by their staff. Joshua?
No, nothing.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So there we go. Fecundity, a word you have to know, refers to the number of live offspring an individual female will produce in her lifetime. Obviously, the higher the fecundity of a country, or obviously the individuals in that country, the faster the population grows. All right. Just for interest's sake, March 2020, these were the 10 most populous countries in order. Okay. What you do need to remember is the size of those countries. Please don't learn them, guys. Okay, the size of those countries. So China, but consider the size of India in terms of land versus the size of the United States in terms of land, or even the size of China in terms of land. India is very small in comparison. Okay, since I updated this last year, so about the same time last year, Pakistan and Brazil had swapped positions. This was on the 11th of August, and since I updated it in March in 2020, Nigeria and Brazil have swapped positions. Okay, so Pakistan and Brazil. So what you can see here is Pakistan has overtaken Brazil in 1 year, and Nigeria has overtaken Brazil within the last 5 months. And what does that mean? That means that Brazil's rate of growth is decreasing, whereas the other countries' rates of growth are not decreasing. And it's very interesting how they've done this. Okay. There used to be the role of a woman in Brazil has changed considerably over the last very short period of time. So what they did consciously to try and bring down the fecundity in Brazil was they changed the content of the soap operas. So so very, very important for the women in Brazil was the fact that they watch soap operas in the day, or if they go out to work, when they come home from work, they watch the soap operas. And the role of women was consciously changed within those soap operas from being staying at home, having children, looking after the husband, looking after the children, seldom go out to work, etc. And families then were very large. And remember that Brazil is largely Catholic. Okay. And then they changed the role of the woman in the soap operas, not very long ago, to being women who had small families and basically went out to work and earned an income, and how it changed what they were able to provide for their families at home. And look what it has done to that population within that period of time. Okay, so Brazil was 212 to 211. It's actually dropped since March. It's dropped. Okay. There's a table in your textbook on page 306. You don't need to answer the questions, but it would be interesting to compare the current figures, the figures for March, and the figures in their textbook, in your textbook. And I estimate that your textbook is about 11 years old. Okay. All right. Just some things we need to talk about graphs. Okay. Remember that in life sciences, you must always start the axis on a graph at 0, 0. What's that point called? Good. Okay. All right. So when you start a graph, you must always start it. Okay. You must always start it at 0, 0. Unless this is categories and doesn't have figures on it. Okay. I'm not overly fond of you guys doing this. I have no idea what that means. Okay. Like, here's a 0 floating in midair. No, I don't know what it means. Okay. However, you do not always plot the information on the graph from this axis. So in other words, if you only given information like from 1970, so your first reading is at 1970, then you start in the middle of nowhere. You don't go through the origin. Connor? No. You start in the middle of nowhere. So you would just draw the line, whatever the line is. Don't go through the origin. You don't know that in the year 0 the population was 0. Okay. However, what this means is that your scale has gone wonky. So let's say you've got figures for 1970, 1980, 1990. Remember that what you do then is, because you have to start at 0, you cut this axis. So you put 2 lines there to say there's a whole lot missing from this axis. Okay. And it just shows that you cut the axis. And so your first figure could be there, or even if your first figure was at 1980, your first figure would be at 1980. And remember, you can do exactly the same on this axis, depending on what the scale is that you want on that axis. You can't cut more than once per axis. Does this make sense to you guys? Okay, I've got 2 nods, and Joshua doing something, and Chloe trying to ask a question. What's the matter?
Why would you then not just do a split axis and start at 1970 rather than 0? Or is it this just for population? Or is this in general?
You want to start 1970 then?
Yeah.
Because life sciences, you always start with 0 thought.
Is this for every graph or just for population?
Yes, unless this is categories. So if it was categories, for example, the calorie content of different alcoholic beverages, just to make it fun for you. Okay, right, name an alcoholic beverage.
I don't know.
Pardon? Okay, right, if this was Corona, then you don't put a note there, because it's categories. Okay, Weezer, alcoholic beverage. Who gave me that?
What do you think?
Alcoholic.
I don't even know how to spell this.
J-A-G-E-R.
Alcoholic.
Okay. All right. Which has greater alcoholic level? I don't know these things. All right. Why is there space between those two?
It's not continuous.
Because this and that is not continuous. So, look, what kind of graph?
Bar graph.
Yes.
Bar graph.
No, why is it a bar graph not a histogram?
Because it's got spaces.
Okay, so if it's got spaces between it, it's a bar graph. If it doesn't have spaces between it, it's a histogram. Okay, and histogram wouldn't have spaces between it because those categories are continuous. Give me an example of a graph where those categories are continuous. Carla, go.
Like, do you want an actual? So I'm going to say it's because they're like related.
Okay, so for example,
So do you want an actual example? Like,
yes. If this was temperatures in degrees centigrade, and this was the months of the year. Average temperature, months of the year. So January is always followed by February, March, April, May. Everywhere where you go in the world, those things follow each other, and so you wouldn't have gaps. It would be a histogram, not a bar graph.
Would you also do it if you have like a range? So between 5 to 10,
Yes.
between 10 to 15, and then.
Yeah, but then you wouldn't go between 5 and 10, you would go 5 to 9.
Okay, and then.
Yeah, because otherwise 10's in two different categories. You happy with this, guys? You okay with that? Okay.
Wait, no. You wouldn't have to split it if you do categories, right?
No, you wouldn't have to. No.
No.
Mm.
so you do 5 and 9.
5 to 9.
You can't have, see the thing she was giving us. So let's say, for example, we're doing a graph of height and in centimeters and the number of people in the class who get that height or who have that height. Okay, then you can't have, I don't know, what's a real height? 100 to 110. You can't go 100 to 110, 110 to 120. Because then 110's in two different categories. Yeah, so this one would be 109 and that would go to 119.
You already go 100 to 110 to 111.
Pardon?
If you go 100 to 109, then 110 to 119. And then you keep doing that.
Yeah, if I understand you correctly, yes. So that would be however many people are that height, and it would just be me, and however many people are that height. So this, no, got to be the same width, eh? And so this one would be 120 to 129.
Then we're supposed to use a ruler.
And a heading!
Yeah, man.
The first thing you were supposed to put on
Yes,
the
man.
And the origin!
Minus marks. You got 3 out of 8.
And your units at the bottom.
3 out of 8.
Yes.